crying?
Oh my gosh, I saw the well, we didn't even see.
Overwhelming.
We didn't even see,
It's
but I saw the
overwhelming.
logo and I went, that's my name, Snow White's up there, and I cried my eyes out.
Things are bound to get messy when a Disney classic meets modern controversy. But no one saw the emotional fallout that would hit Rachel Zegler after South Park brutally mocked Disney's live-action Snow White. Is South Park calling out Hollywood's new direction? Or is this just a cruel joke taken too far? And how much did this really affect Zegler? The backstory. Rachel Zegler might not have been a household name just a few years ago, but her rise to fame? Now that's a story straight out of a Hollywood movie. You see, a high school theater star from Clifton, New Jersey, taking center stage in one of the most anticipated films of the decade, West Side Story, directed by none other than Steven Spielberg. And it wasn't by chance. Rachel's voice, talent, and presence were undeniable. Spielberg found his Maria in Rachel after a nationwide search that saw over 30,000 actresses vying for the role. Yes, you heard that right. 30,000. That's like filling a small stadium with hopefuls, and Zegler emerged as the one who captured Spielberg's attention. Her performance as Maria was incredible, earning her critical praise and setting the stage for her next big role. But it wasn't just any role. It was Snow White, an iconic character deeply ingrained in Disney's history. Now, you'd think being cast as the lead in a Disney live-action remake would be a dream come true for any actress, right? Well, not quite. When Disney announced Zegler as Snow White in 2021, it stirred up quite a conversation. A Latina actress playing a character who's always been depicted as fair-skinned, with lips red as the rose and skin white as snow. Some people thought it was a bold and necessary step toward more diverse representation. Others, however, didn't like the idea. But why was this casting such a big deal? Let's be honest, Disney remakes have a habit of creating waves. While some praised the move, applauding Disney for embracing a more inclusive vision, not everyone was on board. It didn't take long for the internet to ignite with debates. Was this just another case of Hollywood pushing too hard to be woke? Some critics felt that Disney was changing too much and messing with the magic of the original Snow White. You know how people can be when it comes to their beloved childhood classics. Questions began. Is this even the same Snow White we grew up with? Why change what worked perfectly for decades? Suddenly, Rachel Zegler found herself in the center of a humiliation she probably didn't see coming. And it wasn't just about her casting, but about what this new Snow White would stand for. Disney made it clear that this was not your grandmother's Snow White. Gone was the idea of the passive princess waiting for a prince to save her. This Snow White would be a woman of action, strength, and independence. Modern feminist ideals meet one of Disney's oldest characters. Rachel's casting opened up a whole new conversation about what it means to bring a classic into the 21st century. What is the need to change the entire theme of Snow White? It was a flashpoint for much bigger cultural debates, the remake and backlash of Snow White. Putting modern feminism into a classic play is something people can't stand, and that's where things started to get a little complicated. Disney wanted to make Snow White more relatable to today's audience. It's the 21st century after all. Snow White had to evolve. In this version, she's a warrior of her own story, more focused on leading and less on romantic daydreaming. But as you can imagine, this didn't sit well with everyone. Some fans applauded these changes and were excited to see Disney remove outdated stereotypes. Finally, Snow White wouldn't be defined by her beauty or helplessness. It's about time she had some agency. But then many others were not on board. They saw this as another example of Disney trying too hard to be woke, as if they were shoving modern ideals into a story that was never meant for them. And let's not forget, the Snow White people grew up with was sweet, innocent, and most importantly, waiting for true love's kiss to break her curse. This new version, well, she wasn't even going to need a prince. Some fans felt betrayed. Wait, so there's no Prince Charming? No true love's kiss? What even is this Snow White anymore? They asked. It's almost like Disney couldn't win. On one side, they were praised for giving Snow White a stronger, more feminist makeover. On the other hand, Hardcore fans felt like they were losing the character they'd always known and loved. It was a delicate balance between preserving the past and pushing into the future. But let's be honest, when has balance ever been easy? And just when you thought things couldn't get more heated, enter South Park. Now, South Park has never been one to shy away from controversy. If anything, the show thrives on it. With their signature no-holds-barred humor, they aim at anything that captures the zeitgeist. So when Disney's live-action Snow White started making waves, it was only a matter of time before they turned their sights on it. And yeah, did they go for it? In a recent episode, South Park didn't just take subtle jabs. No, they went all in. The episode mocked Disney's attempts to modernize its stories, especially Snow White, and made a point of skewering what some see as the company's woke agenda. The writers poked fun at how far Disney has gone to update its classics, often to the point of alienating its original fan base. But here's where things get even spicier. While South Park was taking aim at Disney's broader efforts, Rachel Zegler, whether intentionally or not, became part of the punchline. It wasn't just the movie that got satirized. Everything came with it. The casting, the changes, the public discourse. So what does that mean for Zegler? She's already been facing criticism for her casting and role in promoting the film's updated themes. With South Park throwing their irreverent humor into the mix, it seemed like the criticism was reaching a boiling point. Suddenly, it wasn't just about the movie. It was about how the actress, who's just 22 years old, became the face of a much more considerable debate, whether she wanted to or not. The satire that hit hard. If there's one thing you can always count on, South Park doesn't hold back. For over 2 decades, this show has roasted everything and everyone, celebrities, politicians, social movements, you name it. South Park has probably turned it into a joke. And it's not just any joke. Their humor is sharp, rude, and unapologetic. So when Disney's live-action Snow White started making headlines, South Park writers started sharpening their pencils. And finally, they make it. One of their latest episodes, South Park, is aimed at Disney's Snow White remake. This wasn't just a light jab, but a total mockery of Disney's attempts to modernize its classics. The episode portrayed Disney as more focused on pushing a progressive agenda than entertaining people. And while it might have seemed like the target was the movie itself, let's be honest, the joke didn't stop there. By extension, the satire landed squarely on the shoulders of Rachel Zegler, the face of this new Snow White. Now, we all know South Park's style. They don't mince words, and they definitely don't do subtle. So the episode went all out, exaggerating Disney's push for diversity and modern values to the point where it was almost absurd. The humor was, as usual, over the top, but for fans of the show, that's the point. It's what makes South Park South Park. But for Rachel Zegler, it was probably a different story. For Zegler, this wasn't just satire, it was personal. And how could it not be? By the time the episode aired, she had already dealt with intense criticism about her casting and outspoken support for the film's themes. South Park thrives on satire, poking fun at cultural trends, no matter how sensitive they might be. And while some people see their humor as biting social commentary, others see it as cruel, mainly when it targets real people like Zegler, who's only 22 and still relatively new to the industry. The episode didn't directly call her out by name, but it didn't need to. The message was clear. And Zegler, whether she liked it or not, was part of that package. Let's not forget this wasn't just about a movie anymore. The debate over Disney's woke remakes had become a much bigger conversation about Hollywood, representation, and whether old stories should be reimagined for modern times. It raises an interesting question. When does satire cross the line from social commentary to something more personal? For some, South Park was just doing what it always does. They say, she got what she deserved. Others were on her side. Even as South Park took aim at Disney and Zegler, it also sparked deeper conversations. Are these live-action remakes actually working? Is Hollywood too focused on being politically correct? And most importantly, was Zegler simply an actress caught in the crossfire of a much larger cultural battle? But the story doesn't end here. How did Zegler respond to this brutal satire, and what does it mean for her future? The debate is on. Rachel Zegler's emotional response. When the South Park episode aired, Rachel Zegler couldn't just brush it off as another joke. For her, it felt like a deeply personal attack. Already dealing with criticism from all angles, about her casting, about Disney's modern take on Snow White, the episode seemed to be the last straw. And let's be honest, keeping your cool is hard when it feels like the whole world is watching you through a magnifying glass. Rachel took to social media to express how much this criticism was weighing on her. Her tweets were emotional, showing her frustration and sadness. She didn't hide the fact that all this public scrutiny had started taking a toll on her mental health. It wasn't just about South Park or even Snow White anymore. The pressure of fame was overwhelming, and Zegler, just 22 years old, was showing the cracks. Rachel opened up about how exhausting it was to be constantly in the spotlight, with every decision, every word, and every move being dissected. In one particularly emotional post, she admitted that she was struggling. That's right, she was struggling to balance her excitement for this massive role with the wave of negativity that seemed to follow her everywhere. Imagine getting your dream role only for everyone to pick it apart. While many fans rallied behind her, applauding her openness, others weren't so kind. Some questioned whether she had the thick skin needed in Hollywood, especially with such a controversial project. It's a harsh industry, and actors are expected to handle all kinds of pressure without breaking a sweat. For some, Zegler's emotional response was a sign of weakness, raising the question, could she really handle the demands of being a leading actress? But let's slow down here. Being in the spotlight at such a young age, with so many expectations on your shoulders, isn't easy. Sure, fame comes with its perks, glamorous premieres, fans, red carpets, but it also comes with constant judgment, and in Zegler's case, the stakes were sky high. She wasn't just starring in a Disney movie, she had become the symbol of Hollywood's push toward more progressive storytelling. And with that comes a lot of heat. Of course, social media can be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it gives stars like Zegler a platform to connect with their audience, but on the other hand, it opens them up to harsh criticism. Every tweet, every Instagram post, every comment gets dissected and turned into headlines. For someone in Zegler's position, that constant feedback loop can feel suffocating. And it's not just coming from critics or the media. Sometimes, the harshest feedback comes from fans. Yet, despite the backlash and the emotional toll it's clearly taken on her, Zegler hasn't backed down. If anything, her emotional response has made her even more relatable to her fans. There was a young star not afraid to admit she was struggling, not scared to be unsafe in an industry that often expects its stars to be perfect. And for many, that response made her more human. Fame isn't always glamorous, and Zegler showed the world how hard it can be to move on. But as the conversation about her public breakdown continues, what does it mean for her future in Hollywood? And how will this controversy shape the next chapter of her career? Satire or bullying? At its core, South Park is all about pushing boundaries. No topic is off limits. No person is immune. Over the years, the show has taken on everyone, from politicians to celebrities to social movements. It's part of their DNA. But this latest episode mocking Disney's Snow White raises a much bigger question. When does satire stop being satire and start feeling like a personal attack? There's no denying that South Park has always walked a fine line between comedy and cruelty. It's their signature style. But in this case, it didn't feel like just another playful jab at pop culture. The episode seemed to cross into something more personal for Rachel Zegler, who was already dealing with waves of criticism. Sure, the show didn't mention her by name, but it was impossible not to connect the dots. The mockery of Disney's progressive remake felt like a direct hit on Zegler's role and everything she stood for. And here's where things get complicated. On one hand, people say, it's just comedy, lighten up. After all, South Park is known for mocking everything under the sun. On the other hand, some wonder if this was less about satire and more about kicking someone already down. Let's not forget, Zegler had been dealing with public criticism for months before this episode aired. The backlash against her casting, her public statements about feminism, and modernizing Snow White had already put her under intense pressure. So was this just a case of bad timing, or was it something deeper? This brings us to the bigger cultural debate: Disney's push for diversity and representation. For some, it's seen as a necessary evolution. Hollywood, after all, has a long history of limiting roles for women, people of color, and underrepresented communities. A Latina actress playing Snow White? That's a huge step toward more inclusive storytelling. But others see it differently. For them, it feels like Disney is overcorrecting, trying too hard to be politically correct at the expense of beloved characters and classic stories. And South Park? Well, they've never been shy about calling out what they see as Hollywood's obsession with being woke. The episode was a not-so-subtle dig at Disney's attempts to modernize a classic fairy tale, portraying the changes as forced and out of touch. The writers exaggerated Disney's moves to absurdity, making it clear that they weren't fans of the company's new direction. But in doing so, they also struck a nerve with those who feel the entertainment industry is losing its way. What's fascinating here is how deeply this debate cuts into public opinion. On the one hand, there's the camp that applauds Disney's efforts to bring more diversity into the spotlight. They argue that it's about time Hollywood started reflecting the world we actually live in, rather than sticking to outdated, narrow representations. For them, casting Zegler was a bold, progressive choice that showed Disney was finally moving with the times. On the other hand, there's a vocal group that feels like Disney is going too far. They're the ones saying, "Leave our classics alone." They argue that constantly reworking old stories to fit modern ideals strips these tales of their timeless magic. And when South Park steps into the ring, it amplifies this argument, essentially mocking what they see as Disney's over-the-top approach to political correctness. While some people laughed it off, others saw it as unnecessary bullying. The episode felt like it wasn't just satirizing Disney's choices, but was also taking a shot at Zegler personally, even if that wasn't the intent. So where do we draw the line between satire and cruelty? When does pushing the envelope in comedy start to feel more like an attack on real people and real lives? For Rachel Zegler, this public mockery wasn't just about Snow White. It reflected the harsh realities facing young actors in the Hollywood industry. The stakes are higher, the scrutiny is more intense, and in the age of social media, every role, every statement, every joke can turn into a cultural flashpoint. South Park's satire, Disney's remakes, and Rachel Zegler's emotional response are all part of a larger conversation about Hollywood's future. But here's the real question. Was Rachel Zegler's reaction understandable, given the pressure, or do you think it was too much? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more updates on Hollywood's biggest controversies.